So my name is James Litley. I'm the Office and Project Manager at the Okanagan Basin Water Board. Our first speaker today is Dr. Anna Warwick Sears. She's the Executive Director of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. Anna?
Thank you, James, and I want to thank everyone for coming. We've been doing a few presentations on zebra and quagga mussels over the last couple of months, but this is intended to be an opportunity for people who haven't been able to make it to those presentations, and also to have a resource for people to refer back to online. Before we get started, I wanted to give thanks and recognition to the Polis Water Sustainability Project. This is a research and policy think tank at the University of Victoria, but their goal is to bring water research into real-world applications, and they have been practicing with a lot of these different kinds of tools, and they very kindly volunteered to help us put on this webinar. So thanks to Polis for that, and in particular Laura Brandis, their communications director. Besides myself, we have three other speakers today. The speakers are, first we're going to hear from Heather Larratt, who's a principal at Larratt Consulting. She's a local Okanagan aquatic biologist who's been doing some research for some of the irrigation districts and for the water board, looking at the impact of these mussels. We're also going to hear from Jodi Romyn, who is Senior Manager at the Invasive Species Council of BC, and from Lisa Scott, who's the Coordinator of the Okanagan and Similkameen Invasive Species Society. So we'll go through each one of these speakers in turn, and James will give you a little reminder before each one of them begins. So we're going to start out, it looks like, with Heather, and want to thank her for coming and contributing her vast knowledge about aquatic invasive species. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Anna. We'll get started. This presentation is about limiting the spread of zebra and quagga mussels to the Okanagan. And as you can see from this slide, there is more than just one invasive species that we're concerned about, but the zebra and quagga mussels are the most pressing threat to the Okanagan Lakes. Also headed towards us, New Zealand mud snails are in British Columbia, in the Vancouver Island area. Dedemo, or the lovely name of rock snot, is an algae that's already present in the Columbia River. It may be native there, but it's certainly doing much better than we would hope as it spreads around the province. Also the spiny water flea, which is established in the Great Lakes, but not in British Columbia. So again, our major concern and the focus of this presentation and webinar is the zebra and quagga mussels. You could wonder how something so small, as you see on the left-hand image, could possibly create the piles in the right-hand image, and it's because these things are incredibly fast reproducers, and their populations will explode. From when they were first detected in the Great Lakes in the late 1980s, they've done a very good job of spreading through the Great Lakes region and then down through the Mississippi. About now, research suggested that there was no way that these mussels could inhabit the western parts of North America. And of course, as invasive species often do, they have unexpected surprises when they arrive in new environments, and they took off from the west. There's been a lot of campaign in the recent years to inform the public of the risks of these, and that has slowed the spread, I'm happy to say. So how are they moving? We could hypothesize that it's animals, but actually it's us humans as usual, and big boats are our biggest vector. Another problem is felt-soled waders that are often worn in rivers. They have moved invasive species around. Basically any absorbent surface or any area that retains water can keep these guys alive for weeks. So it's wise to assume that if equipment has been in an area where invasive species are established, it should be assumed to be contaminated. There's a lot of ways that these can move around. Fishing gear, ropes, cables, boats, life jackets, wetsuits. But the most notorious ones are bilge and ballast water in large boats and your absorbent surfaces, including the carpet that is on trailer runners, and of course any obvious wads of aquatic plants or mud. When we look at the Okanagan and we're trying to establish which areas are vulnerable, We are in the high-risk area. This is based on water chemistry, particularly calcium. So I've overlain an approximate map on the Okanagan on the image on your right, and it shows you anything inside that red polygon is susceptible to invasive mussels. Anything outside that, like the upper elevation lakes, are at much lower risk. So any stream, reservoir, main stem lake, small lake, inside that red polygon is at risk. There's a lot of damage that these guys can do to any of the improvements that are in the water, intakes, outfalls, any surfaces associated with the water, beaches. They alter the entire food chain system of a large lake once they're well established. They can produce toxins. And basically, there's no good news. It's all bad news when these guys arrive. So what would an invasion cost? The Great Lakes region alone, to date, from 2000 to 2010, spent $5 billion trying to manage the infestations and to do research. That did not provide them with a cure. The Lake Tahoe area has had an estimate done that it would be $22 million per year in losses to tourism, property values, and increased maintenance costs. So the question then becomes, what is that going to cost us here in the Okanagan? Now there are some irreplaceable losses, and that is specifically due to the fact that the Okanagan Lake and the main stem lakes supply a vast amount of the drinking water that we enjoy in the Okanagan. So the cost to the water industry could be very, very significant. They're going to have to put protection to intakes in Okanagan Lake once they arrive. They're also going to have to protect their drinking water reservoirs. We can end up with some pretty scary numbers pretty fast when we add these all up. Also, the municipal outfalls, stormwaters, discharge pipes, all can end up being clogged and need continuous maintenance, which is not currently needed. Same thing goes for the boating industry, where boats, docks, and so on could require frequent cleaning in order to make the hulls function as they're supposed to. Equipment associated with the lakes, that's motors, pumps, pipes, are also going to require more maintenance. The bridge itself could be a victim to invasive mussels because they attach in layers that can start from 1 centimeter thick and end up being over 40 centimeters thick, and that would affect the drag on the bridge. The fisheries are also affected because the food chains of the lakes, these guys are filter feeders, and so they compete with the zooplankton that are key to the fishery food chains. Again, we could experience some significant losses there, which would be heartbreaking after all the work that's gone into enhancing the fisheries. Real estate, if we consider only lakefront real estate, we could estimate based on what's happened elsewhere of a loss of $10 million. Loss of tourism revenue is probably one of the biggest areas where the Okanagan would take a hit. That would be distinct from the kinds of economic impacts that the Great Lakes have had, because they're not as much of a tourism-focused economy as we are. So our grand total for what it could cost us annually, and remember that I'm a biologist and not an economist, the number that we came up with was $43 million, which is really scary. So we're thinking that if we can keep these out for as long as possible, we could be $43 million richer every year. That's pretty important. Even if I'm out by a factor of 10, which it doesn't seem that I am based on other economic analyses that I've reviewed, that would still be pretty frightening for a region like the Okanagan. Of course, being proactive is obvious. It's also expensive. Boat wash stations have been established and produced in the United States. Summer students to inform boaters, that's already occurring, and you'll hear more about that later from other presenters. Then we get into the big ticket items. You know, it does cost a lot of money to start boat inspections and start forcing people to get their boats cleaned. This does happen in the United States. They have a sticker system that helps pay for it, but it is expensive. A lot of the American neighbors of ours have already got these in place, and they are actually saving us a lot of grief. They've been intercepting boats for the last numbers of years that were contaminated and were bound for British Columbia. We did a study with a grant from Okanagan Basin Water Board, and what we did was we looked at what would it take to decontaminate for all of the aquatic invasive species, not just the mussels. And we researched the techniques that are available that are used already by searching online for them. And we found some that work very, very well. You see them on your screen now. All debris should be washed off a boat. And then one of these choices, a 1% salt solution or 50% pine sol or very hot water, and that is quite hot for a period of time, or bleach or trisodium phosphate detergent. The kinds of things that did not work for all the aquatic invasive species were dishwash soap and freezing. It's also extremely important to drain any of the bilge, the bladders that are in the boats, buckets, the trailer frame, and rinse off with one of the cleaning solutions and dry. And this is at least a week, and bearing in mind that depending on the weather, like the weather we have today, a boat stored outside isn't going to dry. And to watch those absorbent surfaces. There is action happening, I'm happy to say. One of the biggest pieces from my point of view is that the province has passed legislation making it illegal to transport invasive mussels alive or dead in British Columbia. That means conservation officers can be active, and it is a great way to get the message out that you can't move these mussels in BC, and a way to inform people of the incredible cost. Once they're established here, it's a one-way street. We're not getting rid of them. There's a lot of activity happening on the provincial level with encouraging the Clean Drain Dry program. You'll hear more about that from other presenters, and also the summer student cruise. Municipalities are getting informed. They're getting involved in letter writing. I personally think that we should get federal legislation so that border services can act. They require legislation in order to intercept boats. In my opinion, we need to get boat checks in British Columbia the same way as the Americans have done. And we need to get the information out to the private sector and engage with boat handling businesses. This is already occurring, and with volunteer lake stewardship groups. I think we really need to commit to clean, drain, and dry. This would be everyone. Or like you see in the lake on the right side of your screen, we could drain them for the winter and try freezing them out. Obviously, that's not a very good option, and we really need to get people, everyone on board with this. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Heather. Our next presenter is Jodi Romyn from the Invasive Species Council of BC. Jodi?
Thanks very much, James. And thanks for inviting me to speak today. I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the provincial initiatives that are happening, both within the province and neighboring jurisdictions. So my presentation is on building aquatic invasive species, provincial initiatives, and building collaboration. So quickly, just a little bit about our Invasive Species Council of BC. We are a charitable organization with a provincial focus. We're guided by a very diverse board of 17 directors. And we work a lot on, building collaboration within the province as well as building that collaboration nationally and internationally. So, for example, we are a founding member of the Canadian Council of Invasive Species, which is made up of other provincial invasive species councils from across Canada. We also work very closely with regional committees. They're a key partner in many of the programs, and they also sit on our board of directors. Many of you know the regional committee in your area, whether it's Okanagan Similkameen Invasive Species Society, Lisa speaking to you today, or the North Okanagan or Central Okanagan Regional District programs that also are operating within the Okanagan. Regional committees are independent associations from our provincial council, and they vary greatly across the province by mandate. Some are societies, some are charities, some deal specifically with plants, some have broadened to species. So there's a lot of variety, but also a lot of excellent knowledge that is dispersed across the province. So a quick overview of our council and what we work on. We're guided by an invasive species strategy for BC. Some of you may have seen that was officially launched last summer about this time. We have sort of two areas where we really focus our programming. The first is on innovative education and awareness. And the program that will resonate most with this group is our Clean Drain Dry program, which began last year. We also have a similar behavior change program that's targeted towards horticulture and a number of other resources. We also do a lot of work on improved planning and practices, a lot of training programs targeted towards industry, as well as a plant-wise certification program targeted towards the horticulture industry. So we made the shift a number of years ago to behavior change as opposed to just education alone. So what we had recognized is a number of our programs in past focused a lot on handing out a certain number of brochures or doing a certain number of presentations. And what was really lacking from that is a good understanding of whether what we presented translated into any changed action. So we made the shift to behavior change, which meant we basically adopted the principles of community-based social marketing. We researched a number of other approaches in North America and identified the 3 top pathways of spread of invasive species into the province. And those top pathways were through boaters, through horticulture, and through transportation. And so we understood that there was a number of other initiatives that were taking place with respect to transportation, so that's mostly being handled by industry. So we launched our Take Action program in 2012 that over the course of 2012 and the following years would focus on the pathways of boaters and horticulture as vectors of spread. In community-based social marketing, it's very important to choose a positive message and a positive behavior and really try to reinforce positive behavior change. So the message that we went with to address boaters was Clean Drain Dry, and that certainly is a message that's being used across a number of the states in the Pacific Northwest and a number of other programs that are focusing on aquatic invasive species. Our 2012 Take Action program involved 12 teams of 2 summer staff that were distributed across the province. We worked very closely with regional committees and regional districts in those areas. The 12 teams spent 4 days a week from May through August attending high priority boat launches in each of their locations. So that meant they had a lot of coverage. They saw a lot of boaters. Obviously, you would expect that in some of the regions, like the Okanagan and the Shuswap, you would see more boaters than you might perhaps in the Caribou area. But relatively speaking, for each of the areas, they did connect with a number of boaters. Last year we were trialing a few different approaches to try to understand what level of personal interaction was going to give us the best, basically, bang for our buck. How much time do we need to spend out there talking with boaters and seeking commitments to Clean Drain Dry? Or is it equally effective, for example, to just have signage up at a number of the launches and to send out some public information or to do advertising? So again, based on social marketing, there was very specific approaches that we used. Our staff that were out at the boat launches asked a specific series of questions. At some sites, we broke it into control, low intensity, and high intensity sites, and each of the teams had a series of those. So at control sites, for example, all our teams did was go and observe what boaters were doing, just to get a sense of what might currently be happening with respect to Clean Drain Dry. At low intensity sites, we installed the signs that you see here on the screen. There was a couple of different sizes, but those signs were permanent installations at these launches. And our staff would go and observe and see if people that were launching their boats were actually looking at the sign. Did it make a difference? Were they observing anybody cleaning, draining, or drying on site? And then they also, if possible, took an opportunity to talk to those boaters on site and educate them about the program. The high-intensity sites is where they really had a really high level of personal interaction. So as soon as a boater would come on site to launch their boats, our staff would approach them. They would talk to them about Clean Drain Dry. They would offer to do a boat inspection, help them clean their boat. We had boat washing equipment there. So it was really a spectrum of behaviors. What we found is that obviously the highest level of personal interaction was the most effective, but even just having signs up also seem to be effective. So we've modified our approach a little bit this year, but feel like we have some really good really good background from last year to be able to roll out an effective program. Of course, the desired behavior behind all of this is to have boaters clean, drain, and dry their boats before launching into another body of water. From a community-based social marketing side, the most important thing, and one of the really big deliverables that you're always looking for, is to actually have a boater give you a commitment to clean, drain, dry. They can do that verbally, they can do that as a written commitment, or even more effective would be a public commitment if they were willing to put their name up on a website, for example, saying that they commit to clean, drain, dry. There's also a number of resources behind it and messaging, stickers that we used on to put on their boat windshields to remind them to clean, drain, dry, information that we'd hand out, floating keychains that they can use, again, as reminders. And they also function as a bit of advertisement to other boaters to let them know that this program is out there and they should be involved in it. So in 2012, most relevant to the conversation today in the Okanagan, in 2012 we did have 2 clean, drain, dry teams in the Okanagan. We placed 1 in Vernon and 1 in Penticton. Lisa may speak to this more in the next presentation as well. They essentially covered the whole Okanagan. So the Vernon team did cover to the bridge, and the Penticton team did cover to the other side of the bridge. So there was full coverage of the Okanagan. In total, between the teams, there was, you can see the numbers there. The really big number, I think that's really critical. Obviously, we interacted with almost 1,000 people, which is fantastic, but we had almost 200 verbal commitments and about 50 written commitments to the program, which is very powerful. And you know, peer pressure can be a very effective tool when it comes to programs like this. So the more people that are aware of the program and the more people that are willing to commit to the program just strengthens the message and really strengthens the support that we have moving forward with the program. So in 2013, we revised our approach slightly, and we did that for a number of reasons. Obviously, like Heather was referring to, it's expensive to run a program that covers the entire province. The Fisheries and Oceans Canada completed a risk assessment on mussels, which is partially where the map Heather displayed has come from. And it certainly helped us in identifying what the most high-risk areas would be within this province. We also used information about boat traffic, information from last year in terms of where boats that, boaters that we talked to, where they were coming from, where they had been, if they were coming from states that potentially had mussels, that sort of thing. So there was a number of variables that went into determining where we would have the program this year. We are in 5 areas, including the Okanagan. So we do have full coverage of the Okanagan this year. Again, there's a staff person in Penticton and 1 in Vernon. And we also have coverage in the Central Kootenays, the Fraser Valley, and the Shuswap. Again, we're using social marketing, signage, and public resources. One of the things that we're doing differently this year is, as opposed to spending all of our time out at the boat launches, we're spending about half of our time at boat launches, so busy days, Saturdays, Sundays, long weekend Mondays. But the balance of time, the field staff are actually out meeting with stewardship groups and youth groups and attending public events where they think they'll be able to interact with boaters. So whether it's a boat show or a fishing derby or some other type of event where there's a really good opportunity for us to, kind of spread the message and interact with boaters and, again, seek commitments to the program. We're also in the early stages of working towards guidelines for monitoring. We are still working with partners on that, so I expect that will be something that's rolled out in a bit of a better capacity next year. And we're also initiating some information for the pet and aquarium trade, which follows closely with the new controlled alien species regulations. That's certainly another priority for the province. So we've developed a few resources related to that. So in delivering our program, we collaborate with a number of partners, and one of the biggest things we're trying to work on is shared messaging and shared resources wherever possible. So, for example, if a boater launches on Shuswap Lake and then they go to Alberta for a holiday, they are going to see the same messaging, potentially the same signs, and might even receive some of the same resources, which just strengthens the message of clean, drain, dry, and also just strengthens the fact that, there's a really collaborative project that's happening. We also are working with a number of other provincial partners, working with invasive species councils, conservation officers, marinas, boat associations, schools and youth, etc. Some of the collaborative partnerships, like I had mentioned, that are happening nationally and internationally, we all recognize that obviously it's a huge threat to us in North America. We need to collaborate if we're going to be effective. There are programs dispersed across the Pacific Northwest, and they're in varying levels. There's some different approaches across the states, but for all intents and purposes, the message is the same. We don't want mussels, and we're going to do what we can to keep them out. So the messaging that we're using is protect our waters and clean, drain, dry, and that is, again, consistent across the Pacific Northwest. Some of the international organizations that we work with is the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, or PNWAR. They have an invasive species subcommittee that BC is quite involved in. So we work really closely with this group. It's a group that's mostly comprised of senior government officials from the U.S. and Canada. So it can be quite an influential group. Certainly, a number of the members are using clean, drain, dry. You'll see that across the bottom. It's from Idaho. The clean, drain, dry message is also used in Ontario. And again, I mean, why we've gone with that message is because it's related to behavior change. It's a positive action that voters can take to address this issue. Another really key group in this is the 100th Meridian. Some of you may have heard of that. You can quickly Google them to find lots of information on their website. They are a group that's working to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, nuisance species in their language, west of the 100th Meridian. So they have a number of resources, a number of education programs. There's training videos available on their website. They also tend to house a lot of the more technical information, so minimum standards and protocols for decontaminations and that sort of thing you'll find on their website. There's a number of partner groups to the 100th Meridian, and those groups have adopted the information that the 100th Meridian is using. In 2009, BC joined the Columbia River Basin team. It includes 100th Meridian Initiative partners in Washington, Oregon, Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. Sorry, I'm just trying to quick note quickly on this one. Again, like I said, they're organized to prevent the spread. What was really interesting about the Columbia River Basin team is that they do have a rapid response plan in response to mussels should they occur. It's something that's tested every year, so there is very good communication that happens amongst this group, and so BC is happy to be a partner in that. Specific to BC initiatives, in December of last year, BC launched a new controlled alien species regulation, which stops the transport of dead or live invasive mussels, possession, transport, breeding, etc. This legislation is the envy of many of our other neighboring states and provinces, and that is because it refers to dead or live invasive mussels. The reason that is because, for example, if it didn't refer to dead mussels, it can be very difficult to assess whether mussels are live or dead. So having a tool that allows us to say live or dead, they're prohibited, it's a very strong tool for us as a province, and it allows us to really have a strong program behind it. In 2013, the province is working on an implementation plan for the regulations. Obviously, one of the first things that's come out is the document that you see here. It has a lot of information on the regulations, biology and identification of mussels. It also has, probably most importantly, a matrix for identification of high-risk watercraft and how to report sightings of invasive mussels or assumed sightings of invasive mussels. It's a tool that a lot of partners have been calling for, as it gives us some uniform protocols that we can use in BC. Again, ISCBC, our provincial council, continues with our Clean Drain Dry program, which is targeted at boaters. So having the regulations behind us now strengthens that program and allows us to sort of take a grassroots approach to it as well. So again, as I had said, this training manual, James will be posting it to the Don't Move a Mussel website. We also have it on our provincial bcinvasives.ca site. It's certainly there for anybody that's interested in looking at it. The protocols that are laid out follow the uniform minimum protocols and standards for watercraft interception programs for dry-scented mussels in the western U.S., which is a mouthful. Those are the protocols that are used by the 100th Meridian, and they're adopted by partner organizations. So again, we are following those standards, and those standards also lay out some guidelines around clean, drain, dry protocols. Our clean, drain, dry staff that are on the ground in the Okanagan in the summer will be promoting these protocols, and so these protocols only call for the use of hot water. They don't call for the use of any additional substances. So you will find in talking with our staff that they're exclusively promoting the use of hot water wash as a cleaning agent. The document also, like I said, gives guidance on identification of high-risk watercraft, which is a really important tool because what it allows you to do is really prioritize your efforts. For example, if you're at a boat launch and you're trying to talk to boaters and there's many people that are trying to launch, it gives you some tools and questions to ask so that you can identify which folks you really should be spending your time with, and also direction on how to report mussels. So this is a decision matrix that was excerpted directly from this training document, and really the key questions that you ask is, when was the boat last in the water, and was it less than 30 days, and where was your boat last in the water? And so it contained in the document, I haven't put it in the slides today, but like I said, you could certainly download it if you're interested, is a map from the U.S. Geological Service that lists the current, the current locations of mussels in the U.S. And basically identifies if it's a contaminated state or province where the boat's originating from, and it was launched within the last 30 days, you'll see that in the orange boxes. And essentially the orange boxes should immediately be deferred to the Ministry of Environment through the Report All Poachers and Polluters, or the RAP line. So what you see in green are the boxes that our provincial Clean Drain Dry program are working to address, and that is just boats that are launching within BC, they're in or coming from a non-contaminated province or state. We're trying to teach them about clean, drain, dry protocols, but if there is ever a situation where there's a potential mussel incursion, or if they're coming from a contaminated province or state, if there's ever a potential need for decontamination, that certainly needs to be referred to the province, that they have jurisdiction over that. So again, we are working with a number of partners, sharing common messaging, Protect Our Waters, Clean, Drain, Dry, Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers. You'll see those between Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Yukon are fairly consistent. Sharing resources, whether it's rat cards, signs, handouts, sharing protocols on inspections and monitoring and reporting, hosting coordinated forums for training and industry, and working with international borders on training and signage. So moving forward in BC, obviously very important is the use of standard protocols within BC and across the provincial and national borders, and those are largely contained within the document I was just describing. Strengthening communication across agencies, supporting consistent messaging across partners, and another thing that we're hoping to host in the fall is a business industry forum around avoiding the economic impact. So those are things that are coming up with us this year. And that's my contact information should you have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Jodi. For the next presentation, we're going to return to Anna Warwick Sears from the Okanagan Basin Water Board. Anna?
Yeah, thank you, James. And so following up on Jodi's presentation about all of the great social marketing initiatives they're doing, I'm going to talk about a different approach, which is a public outreach campaign that we've designed and started this summer, specifically about about mussels themselves as opposed to the rest of the aquatic invasive species. This campaign was designed to maybe fill in the cracks a little bit. We wanted to get some kind of very broad public awareness, not focused on behavior change quite as much as the direct outreach to boaters, but more to let everyone know, everyone in the entire public know that this is a threat that's pending. And so it's a kind of a funny, very broad public awareness campaign. You can see in this picture that we have billboards, and it's also focused around having a website where people can go for more information and contact with all of the other clean, drain, dry, and other kinds of social marketing initiatives that are out there. So why a public campaign? The reason that we decided to go with this is because of the magnitude of the impact on the environment. Like Heather Larratt was talking about, and the huge impact on the quality of life for us locally and the huge impact on our economy. We needed to have a sense, we needed the public to understand what was going on, because it's going to translate into very large public costs and other public decision making that has to happen. So we wanted every grandmother to know that this was happening. Whether or not people were using the beaches, we wanted them to know that this potentially could occur. So it has a very different target than the basic Clean Drain Dry program, but it's intended to be complementary to it. And the main thing is that we still have a chance to keep the lakes clean. So we wanted to jump on board and help participate. So the elements of our campaign is we have this Don't Move a Mussel website. The actual website, and I don't think that it's correct on these posters, the actual website address doesn't have the apostrophe in it, so in case anyone's taking notes out there. We do have billboards. We have radio ads that are beginning on a number of radio stations in the Okanagan. We're doing media releases. We're contributing to the rack cards. We have our own social media channels and have also been hosting events like this, public meetings. So this is the website. You can see each one of these little icons. The suitcase is about tourism. The water is about the impact to drinking water. The house is about impacts to real estate. If you want to find out any specific information about potential impacts of the mussels, you can go and look there. There's an in the news section. There's a partnership section where we give full contact information for ISCBC. Things that you can do with the Clean Drain Dry campaign to prevent the spread of the mussels and other aquatic species. It's all here on this website, and here's the correct web address for the website. Just by the way, too, we focus on mussels rather than the full suite of aquatic invasive species because we wanted people to have something that they could identify in their mind. Because there are so many different aquatic invasive species. And if you have good behaviors for taking care of mussels, for preventing the spread of mussels, then you'll be able to have good behavior for reducing the spread of the other aquatic invasives. We borrowed the Don't Move a Mussel slogan from a group in California, a state agency in California that was doing the campaign. People, as Jodi has mentioned, have been incredibly helpful and generous, and everyone sees that we all need to work together on this type of issue. It, as I said, is consistent with the Clean Drain Dry campaign because we have the same objectives. We're using the Clean Drain Dry campaign in our messaging for people who want more information about how specifically they can avoid moving mussels. Other people have other approaches. This is just to illustrate how this is really a very massive campaign for all parts of North America. In our media releases, we're being reflected by different other organizations' websites. So when things are posted, all the different water organizations are picking them up. So here's an example from the Water Supply Association of BC that's picking up a news story about the mussels. So we're trying to coordinate all these other organizations and making sure that they are getting the information as well. This is one that I just had to throw in because it was so strange to see that the Arab Emirates are also picking up on our zebra mussel campaign. And that's all of my information about our public campaign, but we do have information on the very last slide about contact information and that website address. So thank you, James, and I guess we'll turn it over to the next presenter.
Okay, thanks very much, Hannah. And our final presenter today is Lisa Scott from the Okanagan and Similkameen Invasive Species Society, or OASIS. Lisa?
Great, thanks, James. Good morning, everyone. So as the last presenter, I'll wrap things up here and essentially provide an overview of the regional program that is being run in the Okanagan Valley under the Okanagan Similkameen Invasive Species Society. For some of you who might have heard of us before, might recognize we have had a name change. We were, up until last year, we were the South Okanagan Similkameen Invasive Plant Society, but our members and our board had some good discussions last year, and really the potential invasion of these mussels has created such a concern amongst our members that we did opt to expand the breadth of our program to include aquatic invasive species, mainly targeting mussels. So as a consequence, last year we did change our constitution and effectively change our name. So we do deal with invasive plants, mainly terrestrial, but we have a very strong program as well that we started last year and have expanded this year to deal with aquatic species. So you've heard from the previous speakers that we obviously have a very vulnerable area in the Okanagan Valley. Much of BC is vulnerable, but I think we're really concerned here in the Okanagan Valley because of the vulnerability of our lakes and the high calcium levels and the other water chemistry that Heather mentioned. So there is some discussion out there. Is it a matter of if but when, or is this truly an imminent threat? And many people do feel that it is not just an if but when. So we opted to, as I mentioned, starting last year, take a proactive approach to deal with this potential threat. So we're kind of, the approach we've taken is kind of in between what was presented by Jodi with the Invasive Species Council and what you just heard from Anna with the Okanagan Basin Water Board. And obviously it's critical that whatever we do as a regional committee is complementary and consistent with what other groups are doing. But what we've opted for does fall very similar along the lines of the Take Action or Clean Drain Dry program that Jodi mentioned, with some differences. But all of our groups are partnered together, and we do have regular discussions to ensure that we are collaborating and being consistent and sharing resources and knowledge as much as possible. But our program is very much an outreach campaign, but it's targeted geographically to the Okanagan Valley. So even though our Invasive Species Society typically just does work within the South Okanagan Similkameen Regional District, in this particular case, we are targeting recreational boaters and other water users and stewardship groups right up and down the Okanagan Valley. We are in fact working in collaboration with all 3 regional districts on this campaign. So the RDOS, as I already mentioned, as well as the Central Okanagan Regional District and the North Okanagan. We were very fortunate this year to receive a grant from the Okanagan Basin Water Board, and we were also fortunate that all 3 of our applications to the Canada Summer Jobs Program were approved. So that's allowed us to conduct a full-on valley-wide program and place one summer student in each of those 3 regional districts. So as I already mentioned, it is complementary to the ISCBC's Take Action program, with I guess the 2 main differences is that the 2 workers that are with ISCBC in the Okanagan Valley, they'll be wrapping up in September. Obviously our summer students will be finishing in the summer too, but our funds will allow us to continue right throughout the fall, the winter, and right up until the end of March. And that's with the funding that we have right now. But we are hoping that this is going to be a multi-year program that's going to continue, because we can't just do 1 year and think that we've done our job. It's going to be a multi-year, multi-jurisdiction partnership. I guess the other difference too, I'll get into in a minute, but so similar to what's been discussed by other groups, the focus really is on mussels. We do find that with our targeted approach that you do need to address and mention other species to get your attention of your target audience. So a lot of the boaters we're finding that we're interacting with are interested, for example, in invasive fish, or they might be interested in the yellow flag iris that's currently in bloom along our foreshore. So that's how we initially engage them, but that allows us to then lead into our real focus, which is on these mussels, which would have such a detrimental environmental and economic impact if they were to invade. We feel, as do all our partners, that it's really imperative that we provide that consistent message and consistent information. So as has been made very clear, is we as humans are the problem here. It's not wildlife that are moving these hitchhikers about. We're allowing this movement from lake to lake. So it's very important that we get that message clear to our target audience, that they need to take responsibility and that everybody can take action. And similar to what Jodi mentioned earlier, while I'm using the words outreach, it is about a behavior change, and our message is very much complementary to the inspect and clean, drain and dry your boats and your watercraft and your other gear. And the whole emphasis is about protecting what we have and keeping our areas in their natural state. And this is going to ensure the continued use and enjoyment of our waters. And this really resonates not only with our locals, but also with tourists who come to enjoy the Okanagan Valley. So we are targeting both adults and youth. There's a combination of approaches that we've already started to employ and will continue throughout the remainder of the fiscal year. We have outreach materials that we developed last year with our partners, and we're continuing to develop this year, working with some of the groups that have already spoken. These materials are being delivered to yacht clubs, other retail outlets that sell boats and other watercraft, boat rental facilities. We've been to boat shows such as the Kelowna Boat Show in Vernon as well, and other community events, fairs and festivals. Very well received at these events. We've also, we're looking at expanding into presentations to staff at local boat dealerships, and those individuals who actually service the boats, they've actually requested this as we've been going into the various retail outlets. So very positive response there as well. Again, in concert with the ISCBC staff, we're looking at presentations to local stewardship groups. We started this last year, and this has been ongoing and something that will continue throughout the duration of this project. Just to give you an example of it, that would be the Friends of Cal Lake. Earlier this month, I presented to the Sears Lake Water Quality Society. So groups such as that, local anglers and sportsmen's associations are very receptive to this. One of our key partners is BC Parks, and last year we did have one summer student doing similar work in July and August, and she found this was one of the real great opportunities to work with people at our local campgrounds. Again, you get quite a mixture of both locals and tourists. We have some set provincial campsites that we target throughout the Okanagan Valley, and have been working with the park facility operators. We had our first event this past weekend and had over 25 people attend that event, and this is just, we're not even in the summer yet. So these are free family events, and we interact with both the adults and the kids. You can see in the bottom slide there, we actually do crafts where the kids get to make a sun visor that they turn into a zebra mussel, and it's the adults, I think, get just as much fun out of this as the children do. And we are partnering with ISCBC staff to interact with boaters directly at the launches. This is where the rubber hits the road, but because, as Jodi mentioned, about 50% of their staff time is at the launches, this is another area where we're a little bit different. They're already at the launches on those weekends, and that's when a lot of events are happening, whether it be boat shows or festivals and other events. So that's where we're tending to be at those particular events, so that we've got extra boots on the ground, and we're trying to cover the full gamut of targeting our audience in these key locations and events. We also are working with the Water Board to do full media coverage as much as we can. Last week was BC's second annual Invasive Species Week, and the press release that I circulated had a strong emphasis on the potential mussel invasion, and it was picked up by, I believe, at least 8 different newspapers, was also on the local radio. So another great opportunity to get some good messages, consistent messaging out to the public. We also continue to update our website with specific aquatic information, and new to us, thanks to one of my summer students, we now have a Facebook page as well that is regularly updated. Something new this year, which I'm really excited about and really helped to make our program very holistic and complete this year, is we recently participated in a training session with our first speaker, Heather, and it was great. We're looking at doing some monthly inspections of key locations of piers and boat launches up and down the Okanagan Valley. We're going to be doing photo monitoring and also doing veliger sampling and substrate monitoring. So as I believe was mentioned earlier, so these particular mussels are unique from our native mussels, and they actually will attach to structures that are in the water. So one can actually put, in this case we're looking at putting some, the protocol calls for PVC piping, where we can actually put these, anchor them into the water, and look at them on a monthly basis to determine if indeed there are any mussels that are attaching to them. Obviously, we are hoping that we see nothing, but Okanagan Lake is a very large lake, and I don't think I'll be the first to say that perhaps the mussels are here. We hope not, but there is a chance they are, and if we're not doing some complementary monitoring in conjunction with our message about prevention and our work with the boaters, then I think we'd be missing out on something. So we are looking at putting those substrates out and monitoring them on a, as I say, on a monthly basis, and taking the photos with an underwater camera. Veliger is the term used for the larval stage of the mussel, so that's when it's a free-floating microscopic stage. And in order to do that, you need to do these surveys as well. So we're following a protocol that's recently been adopted by the province, And so we are working in concert with our provincial specialists as well, who have offered to receive our samples and take on the task of analyzing them to see if in fact we do have any veligers in our lakes at this time. So thanks again for allowing me to participate today. There's my contact details, and I'm the last speaker, so I will pass it over to James at this time.
Great, thanks Lisa. Thanks to all our presenters, and I'm just going to pop up the contact information here first and then get to the questions. So we didn't have any questions for quite a while, and I planted one there, so we'll actually start with John King's. And he says, Anna, what has been the response from provincial and federal environment ministries regarding how to prevent the zebra mussels from entering the Okanagan freshwater lakes?
Hi, and thanks, John, for that question. My understanding is that there's a lot of work in progress. We've had a number of letters exchanged back and forth, and we've also been talking to folks like Jodi, Romyn, representing the Invasive Species Council. So I think that our representatives, our political representatives, have understand the magnitude of the problem, and everyone is still in a bit of a state of catch-up, trying to deal with the multi-jurisdictional issues. We're talking about coordinating between the province of BC, the province of Alberta, the state of Washington, the other states south of us, and the Canadian Border Inspection Services. So there's a lot of basic work that needs to be done to get that sorted out. But I think that people are definitely moving in the right direction. It'll just take a little bit of time to get something like as fundamental as the inspection stations in place.
Great, thanks Anna. The next question is for Lisa from Jessica, and it's, do the students inspect all the way to the north end of Okanagan Lake?
Hey, thanks, Jessica. We just did the training last week, and we're working with Heather, and I'll be working with an aquatic working group that will be a subcommittee on our Invasive Species Society. But at this time, and due to budget limitations on behalf of the province, because as I said, when we collect the water samples, they do need to be analyzed, and there is a cost with that, although Heather locally is willing to work with us on that. But what we initially are thinking is we're probably going to, in the northern end of the valley, we're probably looking at partnering with the Vernon Yacht Club. The yacht clubs have been fantastic in terms of partners where we've been able to work with them with various events already. They've requested materials for all their members, and they've requested presentations on rainy days when they're not boating. So what we've decided is the yacht clubs would probably be a great outlet where we've got the right depth of water and access to the water, so that we can work in partnership with them. So the most northern then, that was a long answer, but the most northern location would probably be the Vernon Yacht Club.
Thanks very much, Lisa. And I see no one's typed in another question yet, so I'll go back to the question I typed in for Anna. I was hoping you could just describe the effects of zebra mussels on water quality with regard to algae and toxins.
I'm actually going to turn this one over to Heather because she's an aquatic biologist.
Thanks. There's a couple of problems that these mussels provide for water quality. The most important is that they filter feed out all the good algae, if I could put it that way, and leave the junk food algae, the blue-green or cyanobacteria, which can produce toxins. So in effect, what they do is shift the food chain towards problem cyanobacteria species. Also, their wastes contain a lot of bacteria, both E. coli and botulinum A, which produces toxin. So there have been fish kills and bird kills from the accumulating mussel waste.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess I have another question for Heather, or maybe even Jodi. I heard a rule of thumb that freshwater native mussels in BC don't attach to things. So if people are out there looking for or noticing potential for invasive mussels, is it true that if it's attached to a hard surface, that it's more than likely invasive?
That's correct.
Yeah.
There are none of the native mussels that will attach to a firm surface. They're also generally much larger. But if someone has concern and they see something attached, we would, I'm sure, and Jodi can speak to this, rather that they called it in and it was properly checked out than to just leave it.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, exactly. The good rule of thumb is if it's a mussel and it's attached to something, you should certainly report it through the RAP line. Our native mussels won't attach, so that's a very good and easy identification feature.
Great, thanks very much. So we've got another question from Owen Dickey, and I'm not sure who it's for. Maybe I'll just read it, and the presenters can take over. Considering the involvement of the regional districts, what is the ask you have for municipal politicians, such as the District of Lake Country?
I guess I can partly answer this, Lisa, because I had mentioned that our valley-wide campaign this year does involve the collaboration of the 3 regional districts. From my perspective, and perhaps Anna might want to elaborate from her perspective, but I think the ask from OASIS this summer has been the provision of meeting rooms, the assistance with promotion of events, in-kind support through photocopying and putting up posters, and just generally being part of our campaign, part of the process, and part of the messaging to help us get this consistent message out there so that people do start to adopt this whole inspect, clean, drain, dry approach. But I also think it's important that I think it's pretty clear that if we're going to keep these mussels out of the region, it involves partnerships at all levels, so from the regional committees to provincial bodies such as ISCBC to other broader groups like the Okanagan Basin Water Board, but also linking at all levels of government is everybody has a role. And I think specific to municipal politicians, I would like to hope that there would be some discussion of this at the UBCM this year and future years.
I have something to add too to that. This is Anna again. I think that given the magnitude of the potential public costs that are pending, I think it's good for the local politicians to understand that, to keep that in mind, to consider creating some kind of reserve in order to, if they need to upgrade their water intakes, and that will take an ongoing communication with the provincial government and the provincial and federal elected leaders, so that there's a understanding we're prepared to upgrade our infrastructure if and when that happens. There's people who are living along the lakes that may not have access to municipal water, that are relying on their own water intakes. Those water intakes could be compromised. We need to think about this thing systematically and over the long term. We're trying to prevent a mussel invasion, but at the same time you need to have some contingencies in place, and part of that is certainly financial planning and maintaining political support, and that this is should be a priority for those branches of government that have to consider municipal infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much, Lisa and Anna, for answering that. And I see Owen's just responding, thank you. I was hoping it was another question, Owen. So we don't have any other questions for now. We still have a bit of time left. I'd welcome anything else from the presenters if you have anything else to say.
I want to thank everyone for coming. I think I really appreciate that people logging in, people sharing their questions, and stay connected through the Don't Move a Mussel website. And we'll try and bring you the information as rapidly as it comes out.
Great. So just to reiterate what Anna said, thank you to the audience for participating today, and thank you to the presenters. This is obviously an incredibly important issue to the Valley. So I hope you all have a good day.